At the beginning of the year, we made a prediction that soundbars would continue to evolve as users downsized.
The power to tell a story is in us all. The power to change the way we feel, our understanding, change the rules, how we see ourselves, provoke, change history. Together, let's change the bigger picture. Change access. Put camera gear in more hands and keep the story going. Buy, sell, and trade used camera gear. MPB.
So we've already discussed in other videos where we've been discussing about other products that have had to change in sectors of the market that are coming together that used to be separate because of this. Soundbars continue to evolve. So I think we've maybe touched on this again in previous conversation points, but where do we go in terms of the user who is buying a TV at the moment? Because let's face it, I've had two TVs in the last 12 months that I could live with the actual sound system on the TV. Everything else sounds shockingly bad if you want anything other than watching the news, because TVs have gotten thinner. And we all know physics. You need to move some air to make some sound. And if you can't move some air, it's not going to sound very good. And apart from Panasonic pushing the boat out in terms of what they're doing with their higher end TVs, and Philips with their partnership with Bowers and Wilkins, they're taking technologies that they've learnt from the automotive industry where you have to downsize drivers and so on, and they're now utilizing that in the TVs, and they sound amazing. But for most, it's going to be either the jump to what we've discussed in the past, which is a two-channel system with eARC, or the soundbar. And the soundbar has been an area of the market, Martin, which you've done a lot of reviews, from the stupidly cheap to the amazingly expensive. Are we seeing evolution, or are we seeing people or manufacturers kind of resting on the laurels a little bit and thinking, well, it just needs to be a bar with some drivers in it?
It really depends how price driven or motivated you are, because I find most soundbars a little bit underwhelming, but they do generally produce better dialogue than you get from your TV. And I make this point a lot in reviews as well. But I think pound for pound, I think you're going to get better performance out of a pair of two-channel powered or active monitors than you generally will from a soundbar. But of course, you will be, as Ed mentioned, foregoing surround sound or Atmos, immersive audio, etc. And how effective those are from a 1 meter strip in front of your TV is debatable as well. But I do think it's evolving. And it's funny you mentioned JBL once again, because not only looking at the thin profile of those new AVRs, but they're also coming up with soundbar solutions, which I would say are very much a hybrid between stereo and AV, namely the L42MS, which I reviewed recently, which is an extraordinary speaker, difficult to place under your TV because it's quite tall, but my goodness, it sounds fantastic. And I said it was the best dialogue I'd ever heard out of a device at that price. So it is definitely for two-channel listening and designed for a TV as well. It hasn't got the proportions exactly right, but it is very much right in the middle, and it's got HDMI ARC as well. So yes, it is evolving. And anecdotally, I've been talking to dealers. They are seeing, don't have any data to back it up, but they are seeing a shift towards powered or active speakers either side of a TV. And also, it looks quite beguiling as well, having two channels rather than the strip in front of the TV.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about soundbars, but it's interesting you say that, Martin. Again, I spent the weekend at a local show that AVForums were helping to get behind. And again, speaking to the sales staff and so on, and looking at the brands that they sell, eARC into an amplifier, into two really good quality speakers, they selling by the bucket load. But let's move it back to soundbars and have they evolved. The best-selling soundbar, or certainly the ones that we have awarded awards to over the last 3 years, Neil, has been Samsung's Q99D, 990D, 990C, 990B. changes every year, the end suffix. But it's a soundbar. It's got up firing speakers on the front. It has two surround speakers with up firing speakers bouncing off the ceiling, and a subwoofer. And at the prices that they're going for, it's a really nice solution for the vast majority.
Well, so I have not had the benefit of hearing that model, but everyone raves about it to me, so I'm sure it sounds good. And to me, that would make sense, right? Anyone who's been involved in product design knows that one, being able to design like a closed system. So if you're designing a box speaker, you have no idea what's going to be powering that thing. You've kind of got to come up with what you hope is going to work. Whereas a sound bar is really a closed system. Once you know your physical parameters, you can tweak and tune and play with your DSP to such incredible extents these days because the power is so high. And then you have the benefit of, you're purchasing power to build like 20,000 units compared to, maybe 200 for a speaker manufacturer. It's just in a different planet altogether. So for me, there should be no real surprise that a soundbar offers the performance that it does. But at the same time, no one has been able to quite defeat physics just yet. And I think that that's the bit where you're always going to get the crossover point. So Martin was talking about that JBL model there. Fantastic, but big. There's always going to be a point where people trade between that physical size and the performance. We've gone around this many times in these podcasts about, for me, I really believe that the aesthetic choice is just as important for most people as the performance point. You can all argue if that's a good thing or not, but that's the reality of life, isn't it? You pick what you like to look at before you do anything else, pretty much. So I still see that there's a lot of evolution with soundbars. I mentioned the new Sonos there. The technology that they purchased was the crazy, crazy little woofer things. I mean, that could be a really, really big leap forward in the sort of performance that you can get. It's never going to match an 18-inch subwoofer and some real speakers. But it's probably never going to cost the same money either.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the trade-off.
Yeah. And as you say, aesthetics are a big thing here. And we have seen some soundbars on steroids. There's the Sennheiser, they've a massive thing. Yamaha used to have the, you're going to have to correct me on this one, Ed, because I think you were at Yamaha at the time, but was it the line beam projection, sound projector?
But yeah, it was developed by a company in Hemel Hempstead, believe it or not. I can't remember what it's called, but it had dozens of little drivers. Yes. And it was essentially, it didn't allocate them to a specific channel at a specific time. It allocated them in real time, depending on the requirements of the soundtrack as it was receiving them, which I believe is now relatively commonplace, but was quite unusual at that point.
Yeah. So we've seen stuff like that. I've seen stuff recently. So Nakamichi Dragon. So that IP was bought by another company when Nakamichi went bust, and they came to market with 11.4.6, which it wasn't a 0.4. It was two dual driver subs, and the
more is always more, Phil.
Yeah, but it's marketing, and we forgive them on that one. And this is another good lesson as well. It's something I always preach. You go to trade shows and so on, you hear demos, great, but actually go see the product or spend some time with the product not on the show floor, because it sounded amazing at CES when I actually got the review unit in, and I've still to put my thoughts into writing on the Nakamichi Dragon. It was a nice idea, just wasn't executed in a convincing way, and of course the cost of it makes it just prohibitive. It's £4,500 to get into the UK for this soundbar. This soundbar was massive. It was 160 centimeters wide. It weighed a ton. It came in almost a coffin size box from the US. Surround speakers where you could turn the top upward firing speaker so you could direction. Two drivers on those so you could bounce them off the sidewall and off the back wall and so on. So it was thought out. The execution just wasn't quite there. You got to around about 500 hertz, 400 hertz, and it just disappeared and then came back again. So you had this hole in the sound, which wasn't particularly great. But again, it's thinking about a product and putting it into action and so on. Some of them are going to succeed, some of them, like that Dragon, it was a bit hit and miss. I mean, I know some owners absolutely love theirs, but it didn't quite fulfill what it was saying. And at £4,500, it was saying, well, we can, take the place of an AVR and speakers. Well, given the size of the thing and the cost, I'd rather have an AVR and speakers because it was more aesthetically pleasing than that solution. But Martin, you've looked at the Wolf Acoustics Sound Beast thing. So it was a massive, hefty device. And again, it's another way of thinking about the solution.
Yeah, very powerful, very muscular, although again, surround sound perception was limited and no immersive audio, but actually nothing else attached to it. No Wi-Fi, no app control, no reasonable equalization either. And so I think his market was very limited with that, probably to the extent it would be better as a kind of PA speaker, but it was actually pretty articulate. And I really respected what Mustafa Mehmet had put into this. I mean, he's obviously an entrepreneur. He was getting this thing manufactured in China, and I think he wants to do a second version of it. But I haven't really followed how he's been doing with it since. But I would definitely call that product a one-off. Quite impressive, £2,200. Although he revised the price even while I was doing the review to £1,800. But yes, I think it will have a market, but limited.
Yeah, but then we do see solutions. Neil, I was at EEI Live recently. You'll have seen it as well. The Steinway Lingdorf soundbar that wouldn't look out of place underneath a 105-inch screen, would it? In terms of its design and obviously performance. But you're talking mega bucks there.
But also, I think it's a different category of product for me, because for me, a soundbar, we're talking about an all-in-one enclosed unit that's not got, a separate head or anything like that. There's been a lot of companies for a long time who have made an LCR speaker. And I think that those are different things. It's a convenient way of achieving an LCR. You have some benefits in the tuning of it and stuff like that, but you still rely on having space for external amplifiers and all that type of stuff. Good looking product, by the way. And
beautiful looking.
Yeah, also sounds very, very good. But I think it's a different type of a category, more for our dealers than perhaps the average AVForums member. But that's why does that product exist? It's all about those whole discussions about aesthetics and convenience that we've already had. It's the same discussion. It's just, what one of them can afford to put a box of gubbins somewhere else so that they can get that output and all that type of thing that we've been discussing.
Yeah. So rounding up on our prediction about soundbars continue to evolve, I think they will. And I guess what we're kind of saying here and trying to summarize is DSP is getting better and better and better. As the processing gets better, as the drivers get more and more capable, the smaller that you can get them, and we can get something that's aesthetically pleasing. I think there's still quite a way to go with that.